Because as Deborah Willis wrote in her book, Reflections in Black, she noted that there was a free man of color called Jules Leon who brought the daguerreotype of photography to New Orleans in 1840. There was a white photographer did the negative-based photography and brought it to New York 6 months earlier in 1840. So, but New Orleans has a legacy of photography in New Orleans since 1840. So I thought it was an interesting idea. And like he said, it's going to be important for us to do this because there's a lot about the history of photography in New Orleans that a lot of people don't know about. And of course, by doing the research we started doing, we finding out that we didn't know a lot about the photography and its long lineage in New Orleans. So he entrusted me and said, why don't you come up with a title? I said, man, okay, I'll try. So over the period of about a week, I kept coming up with these different titles for the book, and nothing jived with him. Then he called me up and he said, I got it. I said, okay, I kind of figured you were going to come up with the title in the first place. So he came up with the title, Seeing Black, Photography in New Orleans from 1840 and beyond. And that's where the journey began for us to start trying to put together this book, which has really been exciting so far. And I think it's a very needed project because we're going to give voice to historic photographers, of course, but we also want to include contemporary photographers who are existent now.
Okay. And Eric, one of the things that I thought about when you talked about that, I think there's a lot of discourse right now about the visibility of Blackness, of the idea of being seen but yet not seen. So really love the idea that, this idea of seeing Black, how Blacks are seen, and more perhaps maybe tropes or stereotypes, or how they're not seen at all, in terms of how we understand Blackness navigating in this nation and in other spaces, that the visibility of all of the beauty, resilience, and strength of Blackness is, shown in its full power. So thank you for you all coming up with that title. Now I wanted to talk about, because 1840s, starting at 1840 to date, is a very large undertaking. And so as we were speaking to Kalamu early on, and one of the things that he remarked about was that the wealth of the archives in New Orleans. So can you talk a bit about the research that you all have been doing, and what are you finding in the archives, and how the breadth of the archives that you have been researching in? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, let me thank you and your staff, because this was the first place we visited, the Amistad Research Center, to start our search. And we found photographers as late as or early as 1860, 1870, I think the 1880s. So we have gone through what you have, but our next step is going to be either Xavier University or Historic New Orleans Collection and or Louisiana Weekly, because my mentor photographs for the Louisiana Weekly, right, and the Data News Weekly. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue our research, and this is just an aside joke that Kalamu just came to know Arthur Baidu, which was one of the most iconic photographers in the history of photography in the country, period. Not just New Orleans, but period. And I had been knowing about Baidu because Porter had told me about Baidu. I didn't know anything about Arthur Baidu. And I went to his studio to do my work. And I came in there all excited about garden parks. I just heard about garden parks, and man, what do you think about garden parks? He's all of that. He said, yeah, all right. I said, what you mean he all right? He said, who you need to know is Arthur Baidu. So Kalamu is like fixated on Arthur Baidu because he's done a lot of study since then. But one of the leading people on Baidu's work is Gerard Mouton.
Right.
Right here, But anyway, the Arthur Baidu story, well, that starts his work starts in the early 1900s. So what we're trying to concentrate on is that donut hole between 1840 and the early 1900s. And it's been the Amistad collection has been instrumental in because it's like panning for gold, and we got some nuggets, which we were very appreciative for, because we had to sit at different tables and my back was to him. And I had to turn around and get up every time, about every 5 minutes. Eric, look at this, look at this, look at this one. I say, okay, bro, hold on, I'm getting up and down, up and down. But it was fun and it was revelatory. And our next step is one of the other, archives that I mentioned. But yeah, we do have a plethora of archivists here. We don't have to go anywhere, but our research is going to be done here. And so going forward, yes, he's right. There is a wealth here, and we're glad that there is a wealth of archivists here in New Orleans.
Right. And just sharing that history about Gordon Parks, as we all know, has captured, I think, as an iconic photographer, has captured Black life, most notably his work in the Northeast, and also being a major part of, well, I won't say the Black exploitation era, but certainly, you know, photography and influence in that area as well in film. And so I could see Kalamu's reverence and excitement for Gordon Parks. But this is very important because one of the and Kalamu will talk about this early on, is that, I mean, when he joins us, is that the importance, one of the things that he remarked was that, photography uh, at this time between 1840 and the early 1900s, from my understanding, is only really happening in two places, correct? I believe it's New York and it's New Orleans.
That's correct.
And that when you mentioned Jules Leon and the work that he's doing, I think that's very significant that at this particularly important part of our nation time and history, that there are only two places that's really engaging in photography. Why was that?
Oh, well, Jules Leon was a free man of color in France. I don't have the background on why he chose to come to New Orleans, but he was a lithographer. He was an expert lithographer. And I think the McKenna Museum has one of his lithographs. And it's outstanding. And I think they do have a early picture that he shot. I'm not sure. There's some equivocation about that, whether it's his photo or not. I think it was of St. Louis Cathedral, if I'm not mistaken. But as to why he came here, I don't know. I'm just glad he did. But like Kalamu said, the importance of this book is that now New Orleans has something else that's equally to be known for other than food and music, and its long lineage of photography. And it's our history. It's how we perceived ourselves and how we continue to perceive ourselves. That's why we're doing the historic photographers and the contemporary photographers.
Right.
And I like to use the term when I'm photographing the culture of New Orleans, I call it the African retentive culture. And there's only one other African retentive culture in the contiguous United States. That's the Gullah Geechee culture. Other than that, there's no sustainable African retentive culture anywhere else in the contiguous United States that date back 150, 200 years.
It's interesting. Interesting. Well, one of the things I would love to talk about is, the working relationship between you and Kalamu. Certainly, Kalamu's work as a literary artist, an activist, your work, both of you all embedded in the community, you're doing more work in film. Share a little bit about the collaborative process. How do you go about thematically looking at the work that you're focusing on? What are the key themes that have emerged as you all have been talking and doing your research? Can you share a little bit about that, about the process itself between you and Kalamu, and then what is emerging out of that process?
Well, like I said before, we go back a long ways, 1961 to present. And, I considered him as being a genius, right? So I defer to him on a lot of things, but we've reached common ground on just about everything that we've talked about, because I have ideas and of course he has ideas. And I'm always telling him, hey man, this project, Eric, we're in this together. Yeah, man, but you came up with this thing. It's a phenomenal thing. But I also like to, in addressing your question, in terms of he and I, we have two other brilliant people that are working with us. That's Shana Griffith, she's the administrator, and Gerard Mouton, because of his historic knowledge that he has. It's been invaluable, and it will be invaluable going forward. So Gerard is going to write on the history and the historia and the historic photographers, and I'm going to write on the contemporary photographers. But it's interesting that you asked that question, because we talk a lot. We spend 3 times a day. And he's been buying a lot of photography books to get ideas and looking at what's been done. But nobody has ever done a definitive book on the photography in New Orleans by Black photographers. They have other photographers who have come and still come to New Orleans to take pictures in New Orleans of the culture here. But to delve into the history and historic photographers who have documented New Orleans and its customs and its culture and its people since 1840 is going to be very revelatory. We just got to see how much we can glean from the archives that are existent.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, the commonality between us is, it's good. I mean, it really is. I'll say something, he'll say something, we'll come up with an idea, and we'll follow up with it, But there's a lot of things in the background that we have to do. We got to come up with an agreement. Columbus come up with 5 questions. We want to interview all the contemporary photographers, and we want to have that transcribed to go in the book. And, each photographer, as of now, it may change, but each photographer will have 5 images, but there must be one that they must have in the book. And we asking them to submit 15 images, and he, myself, and probably Gerard will go through the other 14 to come up with the 4th for the book. But we want that signature picture that they hold high esteem of to be the one that they must have, and then we will edit the other, the other 14 down to the complementary 14 that'll go into the book. Because we came up with 5 images, but you can't get a breadth of a person's work in 5 images. So that's why we decided on number 15. And and there's a lot of photographers, and the reason we're doing that is because and all photographers who call themselves a New Orleans photographer, there's a commonality. We all shoot the African retentive culture. We shoot the Black Mexican Indians, we shoot the baby dolls, we shoot the skeletons, we shoot the second lines. But some of these images, some of these images that these contemporary photographers are going to be coming up with, because one of the things I'm going to ask them is, get out of your comfort zone of, what you shoot in New Orleans. Let me see the other things you do. And of course, we all know that photographers shoot just about everything and anything, right? And I've been talking to some of the photographers, some of the things that they've shot, and I've seen some of the images. It's going to be outstanding.
Wonderful. And can you share a bit about the photographers, the contemporary photographers you're thinking of? One thing that came to mind when you were talking about that is the breadth of your work. One of the projects I was very just awe-inspiring is the work you did post-Katrina with instruments, particularly the clarinets that you found and took pictures of in certain states of I won't say decay, but certain states in response to the elements post-Katrina. And so how are you, when you're looking at the breadth of the artist, it'd be great to, if you could talk about some of the artists and maybe some of the things that you found in their work that is inspiring, or, themes that you definitely have explored or would like to see present in the book from their work.
Well, I'm not going to discuss any particular photographer
Okay.
because we're still trying to compile the list of photographers.
Okay.
Sadly to say that a couple of photographers who are going to be contemporary are now historic. Sylvester Francis, for one. There was used to work for the Times-Picayune, he and his brother. I can't think of his name right now. I'm sorry to say. But Colombo had talked with him just before he passed and told him about what we were going to be doing. So I'm just hoping that we can get this book done so contemporary photographers don't become historic photographers, right? And but yeah, the photographers whose work I have seen, I mean, they're doing some outstanding work. There's one showed me he's shooting wildlife, right? Well, there's two that shoot wildlife. I mean, just outstanding images. And just as an aside, a little joke, he was telling me he shot pictures of some eagles, right? Outstanding stuff, tack sharp, got him flying. And he said, man, it took a lot to get this photo. So I'm thinking, where did you go? And he was joking with me. He said, right behind Walmart. This eagle had put up a nest there, and he and another photographer went there and photographed these eagles. So I'm looking for the differences that photographers can bring to the book. We got to all bring the culture of New Orleans, but I mean, there's some interesting photos of, the street photography that I do, but also people on the street. And it's going to be exciting to look at what they bring. And I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
And in terms of the clarinets, if you're asking about the clarinets, I was very fortunate to have done that. They were decayed, they were destroyed, and they also were filthy. I every year they would have an exhibit at the grandstand at Jazz Fest, and I would shoot Jazz Fest every year. I've been shooting for the foundation for, I guess, 2 decades or more. And I went over to look at the other photographers' work, and in the exhibit, and I saw a picture, a black and white picture of this distressed and destroyed clarinets. And I told myself, I said, damn, I sure wish I could have photographed that. So I left the grandstand, we're going over to the jazz tent to start taking photos. And Dr. Michael White called me and said, Eric, I want to talk to you about something. He said, I said, what's up? He said, I want you to photograph my destroyed clarinets. And I said, well, there's a picture of your clarinets at the exhibit at grandstand. And he said, well, I want you to photograph the clarinets. And I'm saying to myself, damn, like, okay. And that was very humbling to me. So I went over to his garage where they had cleaned his house out, so to speak, right? 2 different groups, but they threw nothing away that had to do with the clarinets. They even had a little container of caulk grease, and they were all lined up on a work shed in his garage. And they only had one window in the garage, which was like to the back, to the left of the clarinets, camera left. So I had a tripod and I started doing long exposures, because that's the only, I thought the clarinets could be best represented in natural light and not having to use artificial lighting. Then he allowed me to take the clarinets back to Atlanta where I was living, and I used the same process of using available light. So those clarinets you see are long exposures. And the other thing is that as much as I'm washing my hands and using hand sanitizers now, I used it more often when I was shooting those clarinets.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't comfortable shooting with gloves on. It was still compromised. But that's kind of things I'm looking for from other photographers that would speak to the viewer, right? And then the other thing Kalama wants for this book, he wants the book itself to be a work of art. So he wants it to be a tabletop book, And he brought a couple of books for me to look at. He said, this is the quality I want. So those are the kinds of things that are in the background that we have to come up with and make it a realization, so to speak.
Okay, and let's talk a bit about, are there any other projects associated with the book that you all are producing? Will there be an exhibition or any other a series of explorations or presentations re related to this project?
We're going to have a website that's linked to the book. And that'll be another way of exposing and giving exposure to the photographers. Not that they already have their own website, but those other 10 images will be
Mm-hmm.
on the website going forward. And yes, we are planning on an exhibit. And that's where this administrator, I mentioned her name, Shana Griffin, she's been invaluable because she's writing grants. And we've gotten 2 successful grants already. And that's going to be a costly project to get, because being a photographer, I have a lot of framed photographs. You know, every time you have an exhibit, I spend a lot of money. So what we're doing is we're taking the onus off the photographers. We will have all the pictures printed, all the pictures framed in the exhibit.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. So I think while we're waiting for Kalamu to join us, at this point, we will turn it over to Q&A. You can type your questions in the chat if you do have questions, and we will share those questions with Eric at this time. And so, Eric, while we're waiting on those for our viewers to type in their questions, what is the timeline for the project?
Sometime in 2022.
22.
Yeah, because we have a lot of research to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we want this book to be as comprehensive as we can make it. And we want it to be something different. And I have not seen a definitive book written on portrayed in a book on New Orleans photography and its photographers. You've had photographers do books, some not from here, some from here, and they don't look like us. You know, and that's why Kalama came up with the title, Seeing Black.
Right.
Right. And I think that's important, and for people to see how we see ourselves. And in terms of what I do, I try never to take a picture of my people in a compromising situation.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to portray them in a positive manner, especially to offset what the historic photography has been done on Blacks in this country. And I don't want to be part and parcel of that.
And are there any ways, in terms of support, community support, are there any ways that you all would like the community to be involved in any level of supporting the project itself?
Thank you for that idea. It never crossed my mind.
Okay.
We can talk about that again, yes. But, you know, it's going to be quite an undertaking, but I think we're ready for it. And Kalamo and I are excited about it. And thank you for giving us a platform to talk about it here.
Okay, great. So we have a question from Chris Harder. He says that you spoke of working with New Orleans archives as sources for this project. Given the pandemic, have you been able to also work with archives outside the city that may be holding work of early photographers?
Only if they, I hadn't thought about that because we have such a wealth of archive material here, but they have to be New Orleans photographers or having lived in New Orleans. You know, that's what we concentrate on, you know. Everybody, all the photographers that'll be in the book are not born in New Orleans, but they have been in New Orleans, have lived the New Orleans experience. So we're not really reaching out to other photographers that might have covered New Orleans from Dallas or someplace. We're interested in New Orleans photographers.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, and I do have a comment from Kim Boyle. She says, excellent point. Mr. Waters just made about portraying members of the African American community in a positive manner. That's critical. And Teresa Crucian says that she does not feel comfortable at second lines with most white photographers. We know our Black photographers. I am so sorry about this. Let me just kind of put this a little larger. Uh, we know our Black photographers and their intent. She wants to thank you for your work and your commitment to documenting and respecting Black culture. There is another follow-up question. Also, thanking you, Mr. Waters, from someone, unfortunately, it's their number. Surely there are iconic photographers born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, who have captured iconic images of NOLA. But someone like myself who also loves to photograph NOLA, but have never called myself a photographer, would love to share images. Is this possible? So I think the idea is that, is it also possible to share images if you're not or would consider yourself perhaps a professional photographer?
That's an interesting question. That might be something, I'll talk to Kalamo about that, that we might have to create a portal on the website, where people can submit images to be.
Great idea.
I think that's a great idea. I really do. Um, I don't have pencil nor paper. If you can jot that down for me, I'd
I
appreciate
will do
it.
that.
But yeah, I
Thank
mean,
you.
that's a wonderful idea. I mean, I encourage people to want to have their photographs seen.
Yeah, maybe building because that would also be an archival record, right, of contemporary photographer in New Orleans, from what I'll say is in not a not in a way that I hope is not a front, but like your everyday photographer, like someone like myself who would be walking and taking pictures, but certainly wouldn't consider themselves a photographer, a professional photographer. I have a question also from Chelsea Shannon. What were some of the contexts of early Black photography? Was it mostly commercial, portraits, scenic? I think that's another great question.
We've come up against, they usually shot for groups. There's one group, I can't, the name fails me, that we found out in the archives here at the Amistad, that they had their photographer or photographers that documented their group. I don't know if it was the Masons or what.
Mhm.
But this guy or guys, I mean, he really documented. They shot the meetings and everything, right? The other thing was portraiture, of course. Yeah, they did portrait, and Gerard Mouton did a piece in the Tribune, which sold out. It was several years ago. But he also, being a historian he also talked about female photographers who had their own studios, and they were excellent photographers. Those are the things that we can access, in the archives. But we're still looking for that donut hole leading up to the, early 1900s. But yeah, I mean, we probably will come across, hopefully, some female photographers that were, photographing in the 1800s. Hopefully we do. That's why this book, I think, is so important in terms of how deep we can dive into the history of photography in New Orleans. It's going to be very interesting to see what these photographers did in the past and what they saw as interesting, and in documenting what they thought was interesting, or what they knew was interesting, rather, and important. I think I lost you, Kara. Kara? But I don't know if I'm supposed to continue to speak because I've lost Kara.
We lost the connection. Keep
Okay. Well, let me go back. She just asked me a question: how much work did I lose when the levees broke? I don't like to talk about that because I have a friend. I'm not going to mention his name, But his loss was so overwhelming that my loss is damn near negligible. So I did lose some work, but what he lost was I can't imagine the how he can deal with the loss, because he also lost a family member, and he lost everything he shot, every negative, every slide, every picture, everything. But my loss and other photographers lost, we all lost a lot. But one thing I did continue to do, and other photographers have continued to do, they've continued to take photos. You can't dwell on what you don't have, but you can look forward to what you can expose yourself to and what you can photograph. So that's what I'm continuing to do, is to continue documenting not only the culture of New Orleans, but I've also started something now. I had an opportunity to be an artist in residence at the Joan Mitchell Center, which was a great experience. And I had this concept of photographing the Black Mexican Indians and the Black Mexican Queens. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to take a photo. The process was called, the idea was called Masked Persona Unmasked, where I would photograph them in their Black Mexican suits. But then I also would take a portrait of them, how they perceive themselves outside of their suit. But I had one Black Mexican Indian tell me, he said, "Man, when I put my suit on, that is me." And I laughed, but I understood what he was saying. And out of that, I did the Mexican Indian portrait in color, and then the persona unmasked in black and white, and I did a diptych. But while I was waiting for the culture to come in, kind of make appointments for them to come in, when what was available to them, I started doing still life. And all the still life I did when I was at the center was the stuff, foliage and stuff that I found on the campus itself. So when my residency was over with, when the pandemic was at its height, I started doing some still life, incorporating foliage and flora, and I named it Impossible Flora in the time of COVID-19. And I started just putting together all of this floral kinds of stuff that I would find walking in City Park, and I'd bring it back to do still life. Of course, all of this comes from the still life I did with the clarinet images of Dr. Michael White's destroyed images, which was a very daunting thing to do. So how can you photograph somebody's loss? Because some of these clarinets dated back to the 1890, and his loss was complete. And to come up with something that would resonate with him was a daunting process. He doesn't like to look at the images, but he validated by what I did, by liking what I did, because he saw the same thing I saw. He saw loss, he saw dead bodies, he saw caskets. And I tried to do that with a solemnity and a respect to the loss, which was experienced by everybody that experienced the levees break, as they call it, the government flood, so to speak. So that took me about a year and a half, maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 hours a day when I was in Atlanta, trying to make sense of this guy's loss. But I did interview him twice. So I have like 4 hours of an interview with him, and they were very revelatory because, we went way back to when he first started playing music. And then we have a commonality too. We both finished from the same high school. But yeah, it was quite a venture I had never done anything like that before. So it gave me a sense of patience in terms of doing these clarinet pieces, because like I say, they were long exposures. And I came up with that idea. So I carried that forward to doing this flora kind of thing. Since I can't shoot the second lines anymore, and what happened with Mardi Gras. And so, finding things to photograph now with this pandemic is kind of difficult. But having said that, before the pandemic, shooting the culture was very, very difficult because everybody had cell phones that that they were using, and to be able to get photos that I used to get 10, 15, 20 years ago were damn near impossible now to get. So I had to be very, very inventive. It changed the way that I would photograph the culture. And I was a person that would not like to crop my images. So at one point in my career, most of my images were 99.9% of my images was what I saw, not, not cropped to make it what people would think is a better photo. But the camera saw through my eyes what I put on the wall. So, but now my style is different because I got to shoot wide and then crop in to avoid the cell phones and the video cameras and the like that's happening in the street now.
I want to thank everyone. I do want to let everyone know that we are recording our talks, Conversation in Color Talks. So this conversation was recorded. We will have it on our website and also on our YouTube channel. Once again, I want to thank Eric for joining us tonight. Also, I want to thank our sponsor, Verizon, for supporting the Conversation in Color series. And I do want to implore you to think about writing, to think about documenting, our lives in real time, because the documentation of our lives, be it visually, literally, will be the history that people will look at in the future. So with that, I say thank you very much. Have a good night. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next Conversation in Color series. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.